My own brother told me, "You're not family." At the family dinner, he kicked me out and cut me off like I was nothing. But just when I thought I couldn't sink any lower, Grandma whispered something that shattered everything I knew. My real name. The name they erased, the truth they kept hidden from me for years. Can you imagine the betrayal? After all I've sacrificed, they want to take everything from me, my family, my house, my dignity, but I'm done letting them push me around. What will I do next? Will they regret it when the truth finally comes out? Keep watching to find out. I had been preparing for this family dinner all week. In my mind, I saw it unfolding like so many times before. The kitchen would smell of chicken and greens. Laughter would echo off the walls, and my children would gather around, sharing stories and smiles. But this time, something felt off. A chill in the air. Something I couldn't put my finger on. The years of effort I put into keeping this family together, feeding them, caring for them. And now, I couldn't help but feel a distance growing between us. It was a Sunday evening in Detroit, the sun hanging low in the sky as the warm glow of the kitchen light flickered on the countertops. The table was set, the plates perfectly aligned, but there was a heaviness in the air that I couldn't shake. My son Daryl, once my pride and joy, was here. But I noticed the tension in his body, the way his shoulders tensed when I walked into the room. "Hey, Ma," he muttered, barely looking up from his phone. His wife, Sarah, was sitting next to him, a quiet smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kids were on the other side of the table, absorbed in their plates, not even sparing me a glance. I stood there for a moment, feeling the coldness of the room seep into my bones. I had spent so many years making sure they were all taken care of, and yet I felt invisible. As I walked to my seat, I noticed something small but significant. No plate for me, just an empty chair. An oversight, I thought at first, but then I saw that no one was offering me a drink either. The small, subtle gestures that spoke volumes. I was no longer needed. I tried to make small talk, asked how the kids were doing in school, if Sarah had been feeling okay, but Daryl's responses were short, dismissive. He only seemed interested in Sarah and the kids, leaving me out of the conversation. I tried to shrug it off, tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest, but it gnawed at me. I had spent my whole life taking care of them, and now here I was, being shut out of the life I helped build. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Daryl's words cut deep, casual, as if he didn't mean it, but it landed like a slap. "You're not family anymore." The room went silent. Even Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. No one spoke, but the weight of his words hung in the air like smoke. I looked around at the family, my family, and I saw the truth in their silence. They had all chosen a side. But in that moment, something inside me clicked. I wasn't the woman they thought I was. I wasn't just Abigail, the woman who fed them, cleaned up after them, and kept things running. I was Claudette, a name they had long forgotten. I sat there, my mind racing, trying to piece together the feelings that had suddenly overwhelmed me. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft and almost lost in the noise of the room. My grandmother's voice. "Claudette," she said. It was like a jolt to my system. My real name, my birth name, not Abigail, the name my family had given me to fit into their world, but Claudette, the woman I had been before I became someone else to please them. I let that name linger in my mind, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of recognition. I remembered who I was, what I had been before I became the caretaker, the martyr, the one who always gave and never asked for anything in return. I was Claudette McAllister, and no one had the right to erase that. I thought back to all the years I had spent making sure everyone else was okay. The meals, the advice, the support, both emotional and financial. But now, as I looked at Daryl, who couldn't even acknowledge my presence, I realized how much of myself I had given away. I had poured everything into this family, only to be pushed aside. I remembered the times when Daryl was a child, when he would look up to me, when he would hug me and tell me he loved me. But somewhere along the way, that bond had been replaced with something else. He was more concerned with his own family, with Sarah, than with the woman who raised him. I thought about my mother's words. You must always honor those who came before you, but don't let their shadows define your light. I had been living in the shadow of my family's expectations for far too long. It was time to step out of it. I wasn't going to be pushed aside any longer. I took a deep breath, feeling something shift within me. It was like a door opening in my soul, a door I had closed years ago. The woman who was willing to put up with everything for the sake of her family had to make room for the woman who deserved respect, who deserved to be seen. That woman was Claudette, and she was about to take her seat at the table. The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Daryl's eyes never met mine, and the rest of the family barely acknowledged my presence. But I didn't care. I wasn't here for their approval anymore. I was here for me. Then Daryl made his decision. He didn't want me around. His words were cold and cutting. The rest of the family sat in silence, too afraid to speak up, too willing to let me be cast aside. But I was done being quiet. I was done being invisible. I stood up, ignoring Daryl's harsh words. I grabbed my purse. Not a word said, but my actions spoke louder than any argument could. I walked out the door, leaving them behind. I wasn't running away. I was reclaiming myself. As I stepped into the cold night, something inside me shifted. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I had nothing left to lose, but everything to gain. I had to decide, what would my next move be? The evening after the dinner, my apartment was colder than the night before. The air felt thick, like the weight of all my emotions had settled into every corner. I stood in the middle of the living room, trying to process everything that had happened. I'd spent years keeping this family together, making sure they had everything they needed. But Daryl's words cut me deep. You're not family anymore. That one sentence felt like a door slamming shut, and I was left on the other side. I felt the sting of his rejection like a slap across my face. How did it come to this? The child I raised, the one who used to look up to me, now couldn't even acknowledge me. I was standing here alone, with nothing but my thoughts. My chest tightened, the grief mixing with a burning fury I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. Rage, regret, and something else. Something darker that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. Something I had ignored in favor of keeping the peace. But peace was a lie. Peace was the silence that smothered my truth. And now, in the quiet of my apartment, I finally allowed myself to face it. I took a seat on the couch, my hands gripping the fabric, and my mind drifted back to the past, when Daryl was just a boy, wide-eyed and trusting. I remembered how I'd held him when he cried after school, how I'd wiped his tears and told him everything would be okay. How I fought for him, always. I had raised him alone, sacrificing my own happiness, my own dreams to ensure he had everything he needed. But now he barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was cold, dismissive. I wondered what had happened to the boy who once believed I could do no wrong. How had he grown up to be so indifferent, so heartless? Where had I gone wrong? I closed my eyes, letting the memories flood me. I had been the heart of this family. Every holiday, every celebration, every meal. I was the one who made sure we came together. I was the one who picked up the pieces when things fell apart. I gave and I gave until I had nothing left. Now, Daryl's silence spoke louder than any words ever could. His rejection felt like an erasure of everything I'd done for him, for all of them. I stood up abruptly, pacing across the room, my mind racing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't keep letting them use me. I couldn't keep being the person they dumped their burdens on and then threw aside when it was convenient for them. I had to stop letting Daryl or anyone diminish me. I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman, a strong woman. I was Claudette McAllister, and I had forgotten that somewhere along the way, the name Daryl had called me, Abigail, didn't fit anymore. That wasn't who I was. Abigail was a role, a title that had been given to me by the people I loved, but Claudette was the woman who had lived through so much. The woman who had built everything from the ground up, the woman who refused to be invisible any longer. I walked over to my desk, my fingers trembling as I picked up the phone. I didn't even hesitate before dialing the number. Mr. Taylor had always been my lawyer, someone I trusted. I had never needed his help for anything serious, but tonight, I did. Mr. Taylor, I said, my voice steady but firm. I need to talk to you about the house. I could hear the shift in his tone when I mentioned the house. It was a house I'd worked hard to buy for Daryl and his family, but now it felt like the only thing left for me to claim. The house was mine. Legally, it was mine, and I had the right to do whatever I wanted with it. He confirmed what I already knew, but hearing it from him made it real. I wasn't just some matriarch waiting for her children's approval. I was a woman who could take control. I could fight back. I hung up the phone, feeling a surge of strength wash over me. It was time. Time to stop being the one who gave, who sacrificed, who kept the family together. It was time to be Claudette again. The next day, I sat at my desk, drafting a letter to Daryl and Sarah. It was short, to the point. It was not a letter of apology or explanation. It was a letter that declared my intentions. I was going to sell the house. They could find their own way. I wasn't responsible for their happiness anymore. I wasn't responsible for their comfort. As I wrote, I felt a sense of liberation. The weight that had been holding me down for so long was lifting, bit by bit. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. I had given everything, but now I had nothing left to give. I had to save myself. I sealed the envelope and set it aside, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the beginning, the first step in my fight. I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't waiting for forgiveness. I was taking what was rightfully mine. But just as I was about to mail the letter, my phone rang. Daryl's name flashed across the screen, and for a split second, I hesitated. Was he calling to apologize? To make amends? I took a deep breath and stared at the phone. I knew what I had to do. This was the moment I had been waiting for. No more second-guessing. No more waiting for someone to validate my worth. I picked up the phone. I sat there in the stillness of my apartment, the clock ticking louder than it had any right to. The phone sat beside me, its screen glowing with Daryl's name. I knew it was coming. I had known this moment would arrive. It was inevitable. But now, as I looked at that name, my heart clenched, and I felt a wave of anger and fear wash over me. How had we gotten here? How had my son become this cold, distant person? I raised him, sacrificed everything for him, and this was the result. I had to confront him. I had no choice. But the thought of it made my stomach churn. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My fingers hovered over the phone, the weight of everything we had been through pressing down on me. I had spent too many years ignoring the signs, pretending it was okay, but not anymore. Tonight, I wasn't just going to be Abigail. Tonight, I would be Claudette, the woman who would no longer let anyone walk all over her. The phone rang and my breath caught in my chest. I had no more time to think. I picked up. Hello? Mom? Daryl's voice came through, cold and dismissive as always. What's going on now? I could hear the casualness in his tone, like this was no big deal, like everything that had happened tonight was just some small misunderstanding. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this, Mom, he continued, clearly irritated. It's just a little family dinner. Why are you blowing this out of proportion? His words cut through me like a knife. Just a little family dinner. He didn't even understand the magnitude of what he had done. How could he be so blind, so dismissive? I had given him everything, and now all I got in return was his cold indifference. I clenched my jaw. Daryl, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. This isn't just about dinner. This is about how you've been treating me for years. I've been nothing but there for you, and yet tonight you shut me out like I'm some stranger. He scoffed. You're overreacting. We're family, Mom. We're just different, okay? Things change. His words burned. Things change. I wasn't just some object that had been replaced. I was his mother. And now he was telling me that I didn't matter anymore. That our relationship, the one I had fought for, was just gone. I took another breath, swallowing the lump in my throat. This wasn't the time to fall apart. I've loved you, Daryl, I said, each word heavy. I've loved you all my life, but today, I stand for myself. I'm not going to let you disrespect me anymore. You're not the only one who matters in this family. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for what felt like an eternity. I could hear his breathing, sharp, uncomfortable. He wasn't expecting this. He wasn't expecting me to fight back. I don't need you to lecture me, Mom, Daryl finally responded, his voice tight with frustration. You've always been overbearing. You don't get it. You're out of line. I could feel the weight of his words, but they didn't have the power they once did. I wasn't the woman who would sit quietly, accepting whatever crumbs he gave me. No more. Don't tell me what I get, I said, my voice low but firm. I'm not here to beg for your approval. I've worked hard for everything I have. I don't need you to validate me. But if you want the house, you're going to have to earn it. And that means showing me respect. There was another long silence. It stretched between us like a chasm. Daryl didn't speak, and I could hear the frustration building in him. You're not going to get away with this, Mom, he finally said, his voice dripping with venom. You're making a big mistake. Maybe you've always been too much, but this is over. I could feel the bitterness in his words, the entitlement that had festered in him for so long. But something inside me snapped. I realized something that I had been avoiding for years. Daryl didn't see me. Not truly. He had never respected me, not for all the sacrifices I had made. He saw me as a tool, a means to an end, and I wasn't going to keep playing that role. I sat back, my hand shaking slightly as I held the phone to my ear. This is the last time you'll speak to me like that, I said quietly, but there was strength in my words. I've done my part. Now it's your turn to face the consequences of your actions. Daryl's anger flared. You think I care about your threats? You've always been so dramatic. This is ridiculous. I heard him take a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought he might try to smooth things over, to apologize, but then he added, You're just overreacting. Always have been. I could feel the finality of his words, the reality of our relationship. He wasn't going to change, not unless he had to, and at this point, I wasn't sure I cared anymore. Goodbye, Daryl, I said, my voice firm but weary. You've made your choice. Now, I'm making mine. I hung up the phone, and for a moment, I just sat there, staring at the wall. The silence in the room was almost deafening, but it wasn't empty silence. It was a silence filled with power. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control. The decision was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. I thought about all the times I had begged for his love, for his respect. But no more. It was time to stop chasing a love that wasn't real. As I sat there, the weight of what I'd just said, what I'd just done, began to settle in. I wasn't just standing up for myself in this moment, I was reclaiming my life. But before I could take another step, the doorbell rang. I froze. Who could be here at this hour? My heart began to race. Was it Daryl? Did he come to apologize? Or was it someone else bringing news that I wasn't ready for? I stood up slowly, walking toward the door with hesitation. I could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. I had taken the first step toward freedom. But now, whatever came next could change everything. I reached for the door handle, my hand trembling. The night had fallen heavily around me. My apartment was quieter than it had been all evening, the silence now pressing in on me like a weight. I was still holding the phone in my hand, the last words of Daryl echoing in my head. The anger and frustration from our conversation had faded, but in its place, there was a growing sense of unease. I wasn't sure what was coming next, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. For a moment, I stood frozen. The sound sliced through the stillness of my apartment like a sharp knife. I wasn't sure whether I was more afraid of what awaited me on the other side or of the unknown. Who could it be this time? Daryl? A neighbor? A stranger? I hadn't expected anyone tonight. My mind raced. Could it be Daryl coming back with an apology? Or would it be another round of excuses? Or maybe someone else, someone unexpected. Either way, I knew I couldn't run away from this. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, my life, my choices. But still, I hesitated. Should I open it? I took a deep breath, pushed the thoughts aside, and walked to the door. My hands were trembling as I reached for the handle, each second feeling like an eternity. When I finally opened it, my breath caught in my throat. Standing there, looking at me with a mixture of uncertainty and resolve, was Marie, my estranged sister. I hadn't seen her in years. She had kept her distance from the family, from me. It had always been easier for her to stay away, to avoid the drama that had become Daryl's new reality. But now, there she was, standing at my door like a ghost from the past, knocking at my door when I least expected it. "Marie?" I said, a mix of surprise, suspicion, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Yeah, it's me," she replied quietly, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "I know it's been a while, Abigail. A long while. But I heard what happened with Daryl, and I couldn't just sit back anymore. I needed to talk to you." The surprise in her voice was enough to make my stomach flip. What could she possibly want now? After all this time, why show up now? I stepped aside to let her in, closing the door behind her. The air between us was thick with tension. Years of silence, hurt, and unspoken words hung in the space. I couldn't decide whether to welcome her with open arms or shut her out. But there she was, the sister I had once been close to, the woman who had walked away when everything fell apart. We stood there for a moment, awkwardly. Neither of us knew what to say. I had to admit I was curious about what she had to say, about why she was here. But there was also a sense of caution, of fear. Could I trust her? "So, what's going on, Marie?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. My voice was calm, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. She hesitated, and for a moment I thought she might turn around and leave. But then she spoke, her voice softer now. "I'm sorry for what happened, Abigail. I know I've been distant. It's just, I never knew how to deal with the mess that was our family, but I heard about what Daryl did, and I couldn't just sit by anymore. You need to know something." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mixture of hope and suspicion bubbling up inside me. What was she about to tell me? And why did it feel like everything I had built up in my life, all the walls I had put in place, were suddenly starting to crumble? Marie looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and regret. "Daryl's been planning something. Something you don't know about. He's been trying to sell the house, the one you bought for him and his family, and he's been using your name to do it, Abigail. He's been working with Sarah behind your back, trying to push you out of the picture completely." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt my knees weaken, but I refused to let myself show it. I took a step back, trying to process what she had just said. Daryl, my own son, had been plotting against me, behind my back, using my name for his own gain. Marie saw my reaction and continued, her voice low. "I should have told you sooner, Abigail, but I didn't want to get involved. I've stayed away because I didn't want to be in the middle of all the fighting. But this is different. You deserve to know what's going on." Sarah, the golden girl, the one who had always seemed so perfect. It was hard to believe, but as I thought about it, I realized that it made sense. The tension between us had been building for a long time, and Daryl's coldness towards me had grown steadily worse. But to know that he had been plotting with Sarah to steal what I had worked so hard for, I couldn't believe it. I wanted to scream, but I held it in. "So," I said, my voice steady but cold, "Daryl and Sarah have been conspiring to sell my house, and I've had no idea?" Marie nodded, her expression filled with regret. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. I really am." I couldn't find the words at first. Anger, confusion, and betrayal surged through me. How could he do this to me? After everything I had done for him, I had given him everything, my time, my energy, my love, and this was how he repaid me. It was almost too much to process. I stood there for a long moment, lost in my thoughts, before I finally spoke again. "So, what now? What do I do with this information, Marie?" Marie hesitated, then said, "You do what you've always done, Abigail. You take control. You stand your ground. I know you. You don't let anyone walk all over you." I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I hadn't lost everything after all. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. "I'm done letting them walk all over me," I said firmly. "I've been quiet for too long, and it's time to change that." I walked over to my desk, pulled out the papers I had been working on earlier, and began drafting a letter. The legal documents were ready, and now I was ready to act. I was no longer a passive player in my own life. This was my time to take control. I wrote the letter quickly but carefully. This wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace of mind, and my future. It was a statement. I wasn't Abigail anymore. I was Claudette. As I finished the letter, I felt the weight of my decisions settle over me. I had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain: I wasn't going to back down. And then, just as I finished the letter, there was another knock at the door. The morning after Marie's visit, I woke up early, the weight of the previous evening still hanging heavily in the air. My apartment was eerily quiet, almost as if it was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Sitting at my desk, I stared at the legal documents in front of me. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. No, it was the kind of tremor that comes from standing on the edge of something big, something that would change everything. Daryl, Sarah, all of it. They'd pushed me too far. The betrayal, the lies. It had gone on long enough. I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who quietly took whatever was thrown her way. I was done being that person. I felt the anger start to bubble up again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just about the hurt anymore, it was about me taking control of what was mine. Daryl had thought he could get away with it all, but he was wrong. This time, I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to plead for respect, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let him and Sarah manipulate me any longer. Before making any decisions, I took a moment to ground myself. I remembered my mother's voice, echoing in my head. "Abigail, always remember, you are worth more than the space you occupy." Those words had stuck with me throughout my life. But now, they felt like they were finally becoming more than just words. They were becoming a shield, a reminder of my worth that no one could take away. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath. It was time to stand tall, to look Daryl in the eyes and make him see me for who I was, not just his mother, but Claudette McAllister, strong, proud, and no longer afraid. I had to start by planning. The legal documents before me weren't just papers, they were my path forward. They were the evidence of my fight, my stand. I wasn't going to let Daryl control the narrative any longer. The house, my house, was not just a property to him. It was mine. He didn't have a claim on it. I ran my hands over the papers, thinking through my next move. I had to make sure I was prepared, that I had my facts straight. This wasn't a game anymore. This was my life, my legacy. As the morning wore on, I found a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. My anger, my frustration, they had been transformed into something else: resolve. And as I looked at those papers, I practiced what I was going to say. I wasn't going to shout or get emotional. I was going to speak with calm, but with authority. Daryl needed to hear me, and he needed to understand that I wasn't afraid anymore. I dialed his number, the phone feeling heavier than usual in my hand. I had expected to feel some hesitation, some fear, but I didn't. All I felt was a cold certainty. I had made my decision. Now, it was time to see it through. "Hello?" His voice, that familiar tone, filled the silence on the other end of the line. But there was something different in it this time, something that told me he wasn't ready for what I was about to say. "Daryl," I said, my voice steady. "I need to talk to you, in person." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his words tinged with disbelief. "What's this about? I thought we were done with all that drama." I ignored his tone. "I'm serious. I'll be waiting for you at my place." The conversation ended shortly after that, but the tension in the air was palpable. He wasn't going to come easy, I knew that, but I was ready. I was no longer the woman who took everything lying down. When Daryl walked into my living room later that day, the first thing he noticed was the change in me. I wasn't slumped on the couch, avoiding eye contact like I used to. I stood tall, facing him head on. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. I could see the confusion on his face. Mom, what's going on?" His voice was laced with annoyance, but there was also something else there. Hesitation, perhaps. He wasn't used to seeing me like this. I wasn't the one who bowed my head, who kept quiet. I crossed my arms, my heart steady in my chest. "I know what you've been up to, Daryl," I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. "You and Sarah have been trying to sell my house behind my back, and I'm done with it." His face twisted into a scowl, and he tried to laugh it off. "You're making a big deal out of nothing, Mom. It's just a house, a little real estate deal." "No," I replied, my voice steady but sharp. "It's not just a house. It's my home, and I'm not going to let you take that from me." He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "I've given everything for this family, Daryl. Everything. And this is how you repay me, trying to take away the one thing I've worked for. I'm done with being your pawn." His laughter faltered, but he quickly recovered. "You don't understand. This is for the good of the family. I'm just trying to make things better." "No," I said firmly, stepping closer. "What you've done is for you, not for anyone else. And you're not going to manipulate me anymore." I pulled the legal documents from my desk and placed them on the table. "I've already made my decision," I said, watching his eyes flicker with a mix of panic and confusion. "I'm selling the house. It's mine, and it's time you learned to respect that." Daryl's face turned red with anger. "You're being ridiculous, Abigail," he snapped, stepping toward me. "You can't do this. You don't know what's at stake." "I know exactly what's at stake," I shot back, my voice filled with quiet authority. "You've tried to manipulate me for too long, Daryl, but that stops today. I'm taking control of my life again. And you can either respect that or we'll let the courts decide." For a moment, he was silent. The tension between us was thick, heavy, as if the air itself was waiting for someone to break it. I stood my ground, unwavering. Finally, he spoke, but his voice was quieter now, more resigned. "You've made your choice, then." "I have," I replied firmly. "And so have you." With that, he turned, and without another word, he left. As I stood there watching him walk out, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me, tempered by the deep sadness of what had transpired. But as I sat back down at my desk, ready to breathe a sigh of relief, my phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. I opened it, and my heart sank. "Just so you know, Abigail, you've caused enough trouble. Stay out of things that don't concern you. Don't push me." The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control. The evening was heavier than usual. The weight of the phone call with Sarah still hung over me, the words she had thrown at me echoing in my mind. I sat in the living room, the quiet of the apartment settling around me like a thick blanket, suffocating yet oddly comforting. It was late now, much later than I should have been awake, but I couldn't seem to put my thoughts to rest. I'd done it. I had stood up for myself, confronted Daryl, told him exactly where I stood. But now, the consequences were starting to show. I picked up my phone again, the screen glowing in the dim light. I'd already read Sarah's text more times than I cared to admit, each reading cutting deeper. "You're causing trouble in the family, Abigail. Stop, or it's only going to get worse." The words sent a shiver through me, but it wasn't fear. It was rage, mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite name. I should have expected this. After all, Daryl had backed down, but Sarah, she wasn't going to let me walk away unscathed. The silence between us had always been the truce, but now I had broken it, and I knew she wouldn't let me get away with it. But I wasn't going to let her intimidate me either. Not anymore. For the first time in ages, I let myself feel everything. The hurt, the betrayal, the years of silence I had endured. But alongside that pain, I felt something else. A deep, burning sense of justice. I wasn't going to back down now, no matter what Sarah said. I had done the hard part. I had taken the first step, and now there was no going back. But even so, doubt crept in. Was I making a mistake? Was this worth the rift it would cause? The thought of losing my place in the family stung more than I cared to admit, but I quickly shoved it aside. No, I had given enough. I'd sacrificed for them all my life, and I wasn't going to sacrifice any more of myself for their comfort. I exhaled slowly, steeling myself for what was coming next. Sarah's words echoed in my head, but I refused to let them have power over me. I had drawn a line, and there was no crossing it. I had to hold strong. The phone rang again, shattering the silence. It was Sarah, and I almost didn't pick up. But I had to. I couldn't hide from her anymore. Abigail. Her voice was sharp, like a whip, laced with the venom of someone who felt betrayed. I don't know what the hell you're trying to do, but this is going too far. You're ruining everything we've worked for. I stayed silent for a moment, collecting my thoughts. I'm not ruining anything, Sarah, I said, my voice steady, not giving her the satisfaction of hearing my frustration. You and Daryl have been manipulating this family for years. I'm done being the quiet one. I'm done being invisible. Sarah scoffed, trying to cover up the crack in her voice. You don't get it, do you? You're going to tear this family apart if you keep going down this path. I don't want to see you do this to yourself. I could hear the fake concern dripping from her words, the way she tried to twist the situation into something that made her look like the victim. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. Let me make one thing clear, I said, cutting her off. If you think you can scare me back into silence, you're mistaken. I'm done being scared, Sarah. I've been invisible for far too long, and now you want to keep me in my place. But I won't back down. Her silence was telling, a deep pause before she tried to regain control, but I could hear it in her voice. She knew she had lost the upper hand. You don't know what you're doing, Abigail, she said quietly, her words now tinged with something darker, something more desperate. I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied, calm but firm. I've spent my life sacrificing for this family, and it's cost me everything. But not anymore. Let the consequences come. I'm done being controlled. The call ended with a soft click, and I sat back, feeling both exhausted and liberated. The anger still burned inside me, but it was a controlled fire now, one I could harness. I knew what was coming next. They weren't going to let me go without a fight, but I wasn't going to back down. I took a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle around me. But I wasn't afraid anymore. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It wasn't just about the betrayal. This was about me reclaiming my dignity, my right to stand tall. The phone buzzed again. It was a message from Daryl. I don't know why you're doing this, but you're making things worse. This isn't about you. This is about us as a family. You need to stop. I could almost hear his frustration seeping through the text. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't going to let him push me into a corner again. The next day, I arranged to meet Daryl. We'd agreed to meet at a local coffee shop, a neutral ground. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. When I saw him walk in, I could tell immediately he wasn't prepared for the woman sitting across the table from him. I wasn't the shrinking, silent mother he had come to expect. I was Claudette. I stood tall, ready for whatever he was going to throw at me. Mom, he said, sitting down. What's all this about? I didn't let him off easy. I'm not here to apologize, Daryl. I'm not the one who's been causing trouble. You and Sarah have been pushing me out of this family for years, and I've had enough. His face turned red, his jaw tightening. This is all for the family's good. I'm trying to take care of things, and you're only making it harder. I leaned forward. This isn't about the family. This is about control. About you thinking you could take everything from me. But I'm done. Daryl's frustration was palpable. You're selfish, Abigail, he shot back. Everything we've worked for, you're jeopardizing it all. I took a deep breath, knowing that what I said next would change everything. What have you ever sacrificed for this family, Daryl? You've taken. You've used us, but you've never given a damn about what it's cost me. I've spent my life giving, and I'm done being the one who always has to carry the weight. The tension in the room was thick. We were two forces locked in a standoff, and neither of us was going to back down. But just as I was about to deliver the final blow, Daryl's phone rang. He stepped away to answer, and I sat there, watching him, knowing that the fight was far from over. The sun was setting, casting a long shadow across my living room as I sat there, still trying to digest everything that had happened in the last few days. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with tension, but I was calm. I had made my decisions, and now the real test was about to begin. The phone calls, the confrontations, they were all leading to this moment. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about standing my ground, taking back what was rightfully mine, and reclaiming my dignity. I had heard the rumors, whispers about Sarah and Daryl's plans to push me out further, to isolate me even more. It was clear that they thought I would just sit back and let them tear apart what little power I had left. But I was done with being quiet. The next family gathering was going to be different. This time, I wasn't going to shrink into the background. I wasn't going to be the passive one who just took it all. The family dinner arrived, and the moment I walked into the room, I could feel the tension in the air. They all knew something was about to shift, and it wasn't going to be in their favor. Daryl, sitting at the head of the table, shot me a glance that said it all. He was expecting me to be meek, apologetic, to back down. But that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't here to make nice. I was here to stand up for myself. "Mom," Daryl began, his tone dismissive, "we need to talk about the trouble you've been causing in the family. You're making things harder for all of us." I held his gaze, my hands steady on my lap. "I'm not the one causing trouble, Daryl. I've spent my life giving everything to this family. It's time for me to take back what's mine, and if that's going to make you uncomfortable, then so be it." He scoffed, a sarcastic laugh escaping him as he tried to downplay my words. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." "It's just a family dinner, Mom." I didn't flinch. "No, it's not just a dinner. It's about the years of manipulation, the years of being treated like I didn't matter. And I'm done letting that happen." Before he could respond, Sarah cut in, her voice sharp and accusing. "You're not understanding this, Abigail. You're ruining everything. You've always been the one to stir up drama, and now it's just gotten worse." Her words stung, but I wasn't about to let her have the last word. Just as I was about to speak, I felt a surprising shift. A voice that wasn't mine, but one that I hadn't expected. "That's enough, Sarah," came a voice from the back of the room. My cousin Lynn stood there, a calm yet firm presence. I hadn't expected her to speak up. Lynn had always kept her distance, but I knew she had been watching how Daryl and Sarah had treated me. "Abigail's right. You can't just bully her into silence. We all see what's going on." The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at Lynn, including Daryl and Sarah, both stunned. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The weight I had been carrying lifted slightly. I wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in years, someone else had seen the truth. "Thank you, Lynn," I said, my voice steady. The power dynamic in the room had shifted, and it felt good. But that didn't mean the fight was over. Daryl tried to regain control, his voice rising with frustration. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand the family dynamics. You're jeopardizing everything for your pride." I stood my ground. "It's not about pride, Daryl. It's about respect. Something you've never given me. I've sacrificed too much for this family, and I'm done being overlooked." He glared at me, but I could see the shift in him. He realized that he couldn't manipulate me anymore. The truth was out, and it wasn't going back in. But just as I was about to make my final point, Sarah, her face twisted with anger, suddenly jabbed, "You've always been selfish, Abigail. You can either choose your family or your pride, but you can't have both." The room grew still as the ultimatum hung in the air, her words a final blow to the tense atmosphere. For a moment, I felt the weight of her challenge, but then I felt something else. Clarity. "I don't need to choose," I said, my voice calm and resolute. "My pride is a part of my family. I've been silent for too long, but not anymore. If you can't accept that, then you'll have to live with it. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not backing down." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the energy in the room shift again, the air thick with the tension of our unspoken battle. Sarah, trying to regain control, opened her mouth to say something more, but I held up my hand, silencing her. I stood up, taking a deep breath as I prepared to leave the room. I've said my piece. I've been quiet for far too long, but I'm done now. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a family divided and a life that was about to change. As I walked away, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. But I was done being afraid, done being controlled. I had made my stand, and there was no going back now. The evening was still, yet the weight of what was about to happen hung in the air like a storm on the horizon. The sun had already set, leaving the room in an amber glow that felt almost too calm for the chaos to come. I sat at the familiar dinner table, a place where I had endured so much over the years. This time, however, I wasn't the same woman who once sat silently, waiting for things to pass. I was different now, stronger, firmer, determined. The family gathering ahead would be the final test. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside my own heart. I had already made my stand, but the family wasn't going to let me go that easily. Daryl and Sarah still believed they held the power in this family. They thought I was weak, that I would cower like I had for years. But they were wrong. I had nothing left to lose, and I wasn't backing down. The dinner began with an unsettling silence. The food on the table sat untouched, the clink of silverware absent. Daryl was the first to speak, but his tone was all condescension. "Mom, I'm sure you realize that what you've done has caused enough problems already. You've stirred up more trouble than necessary." I felt the fire in my chest, but I stayed calm. My words were measured, but firm. I've spent my whole life sacrificing for this family, and for the first time, I'm standing up for myself. If you want to call it trouble, fine, but I won't sit back and be ignored anymore. Sarah, as always, couldn't stay quiet for long. "You think you've done something noble? You're just selfish, Abigail. All you're doing is tearing this family apart." Her words felt like knives, but they weren't sharp enough to pierce the armor I had built. "No, Sarah," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm rebuilding myself, something none of you have ever bothered to understand." The tension in the room escalated, the hostility thickening with every passing second. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I didn't anticipate the next moment. Just as Sarah was about to launch another attack, my cousin Elaine spoke up, her voice surprisingly firm. "That's enough, Sarah," she said, her eyes locking with mine. "I'm tired of watching the way you treat Abigail. She's not alone in this fight." The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Elaine. I could feel the shift, the power moving in my favor. For the first time in years, someone was standing by me, and it meant the world. I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Daryl's face hardened, but he wasn't ready to surrender. "You don't know what you're talking about," he spat, his voice laced with frustration. "You're being unreasonable, Abigail. You're jeopardizing everything we've worked for." "I've sacrificed everything for you, Daryl," I said, my voice sharp. "And what have I gotten in return? Disrespect, manipulation, silence. I'm done. I'm done being treated like I'm invisible." But before I could say anything more, Sarah's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You're going to regret this, Abigail. You'll choose between your pride and your family. Make no mistake." Her words felt like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping the floor, the sound loud in the silence that followed. "I'm not going to choose. My pride is my family. If you can't respect that, then I won't be here to be disrespected anymore." For a moment, everything stopped. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, Daryl's phone rang. He shot me a glare before stepping away to answer it, leaving me with Sarah and the rest of the family. I stood there, watching him walk away, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment when everything changed. I had made my stand, and I wasn't going to let them take it away from me. "Don't think this is over," Sarah muttered, her eyes full of venom. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." "I'm not afraid of the truth," I replied, my voice calm, unwavering. "I'm not afraid of you." I walked to the door, leaving the family behind. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my skin, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The weight of the years I had spent under their control began to lift, replaced with a sense of power I hadn't felt in decades. The world ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I was in control of my own life now, and no one was going to take that from me. The sun was setting outside, casting a soft, golden light across the room, but inside, the weight of everything that had happened still lingered. The air in the house felt still, almost too quiet. I sat by the window, my gaze drifting over the peaceful scene, but my mind was anything but calm. The events of the previous night, my confrontation with Daryl and Sarah, were still fresh, and the question of what comes next was weighing heavily on me. I had made my stand, and for the first time in years I had spoken my truth, but there was still so much uncertainty ahead. Was this really the end, or would the rift between us only deepen? I felt a strange mixture of relief and vulnerability. It was as though the storm had passed, but the clouds still hung heavy in the sky, threatening to rain again. The decision I had made, the words I had spoken, felt like they had shifted something fundamental in my family, but I couldn't shake the nagging question of whether things would truly change. I thought about everything I had endured, the years of neglect, the emotional toll of being silenced, and the weight of my family's expectations. So many times, I had bent to their will, swallowed my pride, and accepted whatever scraps they threw my way. But not anymore. I had finally taken control of my own narrative. For the first time, I felt like I was reclaiming my life. My mind drifted to those days of sacrifice, when I'd given everything to the family, hoping it would one day be enough. But it never was. I had spent so many years trying to fit myself into the roles they expected me to play: the good mother, the supportive wife, the dutiful daughter. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself in the process. I was left with nothing but the hollow shell of a person who had forgotten how to stand up for herself. And then I realized, no more. I wasn't the problem. The problem had always been them, their disregard for me, their manipulation, and their ability to twist every act of love into something to be taken for granted. Just as I was about to turn away from the window, I saw it. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Daryl. My heart sank as I read the words. "We need to talk. You've made your point, but I'm not done yet." I took a deep breath. I knew this wasn't over. The calm I had been feeling was only temporary. The family wasn't ready to accept the truth I had exposed, and I was certain that Daryl was going to try and manipulate me into backing down again. But this time, I wouldn't let him. I didn't even think twice. I was done playing their games, done pretending that things could go back to how they were. I stood up, my decision already made. I would face him head on. As I stepped out the door, I felt the weight of everything I had fought for pressing down on me. The storm outside mirrored the storm brewing inside me. But I wasn't afraid. I had made it this far, and I wasn't going to let him tear me down now. The meeting was set for a coffee shop, a neutral ground. I knew Daryl would try to control the situation, try to make me feel guilty for everything that had happened. But this time, I was prepared. The moment I stepped into the coffee shop, I saw him sitting at a table, his usual air of superiority plastered on his face. But there was something different about him today. He wasn't in control anymore. "I hope you've had some time to think about what you've done, Abigail," he started, his tone dripping with condescension. "You've caused a lot of problems in this family, and frankly, I don't think it's worth it." I didn't flinch. "I haven't caused anything, Daryl. I've been quiet for too long, bending over backward to keep the peace while you and Sarah ignored me. I'm done with that. You can't just push me around anymore." His eyes narrowed. "You're being unreasonable. You've jeopardized everything. This isn't about you, it's about family." I leaned in, my voice steady but firm. "No, Daryl. This is about me. This is about the years I spent feeling like I didn't matter. You've taken everything from me, and I'm done letting you get away with it. I'm done seeking your approval." Daryl shifted uncomfortably, his facade starting to crack. "You're throwing everything away," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "This isn't the way it's supposed to be." I could feel my anger rising, but I remained calm. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally standing up for myself. You may not like it, but that's the truth. And I'm not asking for your permission anymore. The tension in the room was palpable. For a moment, it seemed like Daryl was about to say something, but instead, he just sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. This isn't over, Abigail. You'll see. I stood up, not wanting to waste another second in this toxic space. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I said, looking him square in the eye. And I'm not afraid of losing this family. I've already lost enough. I walked away, the weight in my chest lifting with every step. But as I left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at it, and a text from my cousin appeared. I'm proud of you. It's time to move on. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The past was over, and the future was mine to shape.